You know, there is a quote from, and I never would have thought that one day I would be saying this, but here I am quoting Friedrich Nietzsche. Here I am. I have written against Friedrich Nietzsche numerous times in my life. I do not like the idea of the Übermensch or anything like that. But Friedrich Nietzsche, or Nietzsche as they call him, had a really good quote about politics and violence. Here it is. This is a really good quote, guys. I want to use this one day. Here's the quote. In individuals... What the... This freaking internet. In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. This is a brilliant statement. This is so brilliant, guys. Seriously, this is such a brilliant statement. It's so true. I'm going to read it to you guys again. I'm going to read it to you guys one more time. In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. In this one statement, Nietzsche has summarized the insanity of mobs, the insanity of party politics, how crazy party politics can become. He has summarized how human beings can go from being just normal individuals to becoming bloodthirsty maniacs, all because of party politics, collective nationalism, mass hysteria. Like, for example, I am 100% certain that if you were to go back in time to 1946, let's say, right after the Second World War, and you were to meet a veteran of the Japanese Imperial military, and this veteran, during the war, raped a bunch of women, bayoneted a bunch of people to death, and did a whole bunch of other heinous things, that person, if you were to have met them in 1946, would have been a very swell person to be around. It's the truth. He would have taken you to his home. He would have introduced you to his family. They would have served you some delicious tempura. And tempura is basically like it's ingredients like shrimp, fish, vegetables that are covered in a rice flour batter, and then deep fried. It's deep fried food. He would have served you some tempura. He would have served you maybe some sushi, some good, delicious, fresh, raw salmon and tuna. He would have served you some delicious sake afterwards, maybe some beer, maybe some Japanese treats, sweetbread, something like that. I don't know what kind of desserts Japanese people usually eat. But he would have been very hospitable. And you would have thought, wow, such a swell guy. But during the war, he was a monster. During the war, he was a psychopath. During the war, he showed his true colors, is what that really means. He showed his true colors. And this can be said for a lot of different people. Another example, Lebanon, the Civil War. All of those rapists and mass murderers who fought in the Lebanese Civil War, be they Palestinian or be they Falangist, were very hospitable people in normal life. I know this because I'm Middle Eastern and I have an understanding of the Middle Eastern culture. Middle Eastern people, no matter how bad they may be, and this is the rule, not the exception. No matter how bad they may be, no matter how bloodthirsty, no matter how violent an individual may be, they will be very, very hospitable. Extremely hospitable. They will serve you tea. They will serve you very good food. They will spend hours to prepare a meal for you. And you wouldn't know that the head of the house was a rapist and a mass murderer. You wouldn't know. Unless he told you, or unless you read it somewhere. But generally speaking, he's not going to tell you what he did. Years ago, many years ago, we're talking 2007 or 8. I want to say 2000 and actually before that. Let me think. This was back in California, so this had to have been 2003 or 2004. I met a Lebanese guy who fought in the Lebanese Civil War. He was not a Falungist. He was not Palestinian. He was a Shiite, a former Shiite. He had left Islam, but he fought for the Shiite side in Lebanon. So in the Lebanese Civil War, you had many different factions, but the factions could be generally broken down into Palestinian, Falungist, and Shiite. So the Shiites were fighting as a proxy. Well, the Shiites were fighting for the Shia religion, for the advancement of their Shiite cause. But they would eventually become Hezbollah, which is an Iranian-backed proxy now. But you had the Shiites. The Shiites fought mainly under a paramilitary organization called Amal. And the Falungists actually worked with some of the Shiites. The Israelis worked with some of them to fight against the Palestinians. Palestinians were mainly Sunni, but a lot of them were actually just atheists, and some of them were even Christians, Christian Palestinian nationalists. But this man that I had met, his name was Zakaria was his name. He moved from Lebanon and settled in Canada. And he would act super nice. I mean, super nice, very polite, very respectful. When he shook your hand, he had it was a soft touch. He didn't look like a very imposing character. I mean, he didn't look intimidating at all. You'd think that you could kill this guy in one punch in a fight. You would never think that this person was violent or anything like that. So one day he was talking to my father, and he tells my father this story. He says, one day he went to some corner store, and about 3 or 4 big black guys came in. It was at night. 3 or 4 big black guys came in, and they attacked the register man. They attacked the register man, and they wanted to rob the store. And he said that he single-handedly defended the register man and beat up those black guys, and they all ran away. Now, hearing this story coming from a guy who looks like a human toothpick, you would think that this guy was full of shit. You would think that until he showed you the newspaper article. And his picture was on the newspaper article. And the headline was something like, "Man rescues register worker from being robbed." And the story was there that he fought against with no weapons, with just close combat. With his own hands, he fought against multiple black guys who were bigger than him, and they ran out the store. So you're thinking, wow, this guy's kind of a badass, right? I mean, he's a badass, right? He's a brave man. Most people don't have the courage to do something like that. So one day he was talking to my dad, and he confessed to my father that he had killed a ton of people in the Lebanese Civil War. That he killed people. A lot of people, he said. And he gave one specific story in which he killed a fellow Shia Muslim. He said that there was this Muslim guy who insisted that he pray every morning, very early in the morning, before the sun would rise, and he did not want to wake up for the early morning prayer. And so this guy would knock on his door and say it's time to pray. So one day, the guy knocks on his door, and this Shiite guy opened the door and said, "If you wake me up again, I'm going to kill you." The next morning, the guy came up, knocked on his door, and instead of opening the door, this Shiite militant took out his pistol, fired one bullet through the door. I think there was an eye hole on the door so he could see where the guy was. He calculated where his head was past the door. He pointed his pistol at the door, and he just pulled the trigger one time, and the bullet went through the door into the guy's head. And he said the guy dropped dead, and he says I went back to sleep like nothing happened. Went back to sleep like nothing happened. So one day, there was this guy that I knew. He lived in Bakersfield, and this guy had a lot of guns. I used to hang out with him sometimes, and we would go shooting, and we would do target practice and all that. This guy had a lot of guns, okay? He had this house, big California redneck guy. He had this little house literally in the middle of nowhere. Now, if any of you guys have ever been to Southern California, okay, then you know what I'm talking about when I describe the desert that surrounds Bakersfield. Bakersfield is basically in a desert. It looks like a post-apocalyptic dystopian nightmare. That's what Bakersfield looks like. And it kind of is. I mean, it's kind of a shithole. But now they say it's growing and a lot of people are moving there. Okay, God bless the... I hope for the best, right? For the city. But this guy lived in the middle of nowhere in Bakersfield, and he had a lot of guns. And when I mean a lot of guns, I mean we're talking like Neo in the Matrix saying guns, lots of guns. And the guy hits the button and the giant just column of guns comes right before his eyes. Like, we're talking that type of guns, that many guns, a ton of guns. All right, a ton of guns. This guy had guns everywhere, and we're talking like 19th century rifles from the cowboy days, from Clint Eastwood times, you know, like spaghetti western type rifles. We're talking machine guns, submachine guns, lots of semi-automatics. He had this one gun that would fire this anti-aircraft ammunition. He had a Revolutionary War cannon. He had sniper scopes. I mean, the guy was so armed. I have no idea how the hell he was able to get that many weapons, but he did. And one day, this Lebanese guy came over to go shoot guns and stuff like that. And this Lebanese guy, said that he could throw knives. He said, I can throw knives. And I wasn't there, but I was hanging out with this guy who owned all the guns, and he says, you know, that Lebanese guy came over. And I said, okay, what happened? And he said, well, you know, he told me that he could throw knives pretty accurately. And he said, I didn't really believe him, but I asked him to show me. He says, Ted, this Lebanese guy took a bunch of knives, just regular knives, and he was able to throw them to the point where the knives, the point of the blades would go right into a tree. And he could just hit this tree several times. He was so accurate with the knives. And all these stories I heard really convinced me that this guy was a killer. The guy was a killer. But you would have never known that just by your first impression of him. But one thing, though, that I did notice is that when you met him and he shook his hand, he had this look in his eye like there wasn't a soul in there. I think the guy was a very callous individual. But when you looked into his eyes, you could see, well, you really couldn't see anything. I mean, there was nothing there. There was no soul. There was no soul in that guy. I mean, guy was crazy. But anyway, yeah. So people can be very normal as individuals, right? In their own individual lives, they can be very normal, very nice, very hospitable. But when party politics comes in, nationalism kicks in, that nationalist zeal kicks in, watch out. People who are your neighbors could become ravenous wolves overnight, thirsty for blood. Don't believe me? Just look at what happened with the Poles. Polish people who survived the reign of terror that was done by the Ukrainian fascists will tell you that the Ukrainians who were murdering them were their neighbors. They were their neighbors who in normal life were very friendly with them, who never acted violent, never acted aggressive, and overnight they showed their true colors. Why? Why? Because one night you have a priest, a Ukrainian priest who comes along and he says, "Shed the blood of the Poles. Jesus Christ is with us. He wants us to kill these people because they are our enemies, because for some reason, they deserve death, because they have more churches. Their churches are outnumbering our churches. They have more land than we do, blah, 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 blah. So we should go and raise hell and slaughter them." And then you had all these activists who were coming out saying pretty much the same shit, although in a more secular manner. Oh, well, go out and kill the Poles. The Poles are evil. Slaughter them. Kill them wherever you find them. That sort of thing. And that's what happened. That is what happened. And the people who were being butchered were so shocked because they thought, wait a second, we were hanging out last night. What are you doing? We're friends. We're neighbors. You never did this. You never acted like this before. What happened to you? Because individuals are rarely ever insane. But in party politics, in nationalism, in a collective rage, people will show who they really are. And there's many different examples of this. For example, during I want to say this happened in the 1940s. There was an anti-Jewish pogrom in Iraq. This happened in 1941. And this is basically when the Iraqis had a pogrom against the Jews who were living in Iraq, Iraqi Jews. And the Iraqi Jews were butchered. They were butchered. Let's see. I want to know how many were actually killed by the Iraqis. That's what I'm trying to find out. But the actual word for this massacre is the Farhud. So they say between 180 and 1,000 Jews were butchered in the Farhud, in this massacre. And the Iraqi Muslims were so vicious. I mean, they were violent like the Ukrainians were. They would rip the fetuses out of pregnant women. I mean, they were just absolutely demonic and evil. And there was one story I read where they took a Jewish woman and they cut her breast off, and then they stuck the breast in her baby's mouth as some weird sadistic entertainment. Like, really, really sick stuff, guys. Very sick stuff. And there was one interview that I watched of a Jewish man who survived that. This was many years ago that I watched this documentary. And this man said, well, what's so strange was the fact that these people were our neighbors. And we never expected that they would ever act like this. So Nietzsche's words of wisdom here apply to this historical, albeit very dark, event as well. Many different events like this that one can find in history. I mean, you can look at the situation in Kosovo during the Second World War. Albanians who were living with Serbs butchered Serbs, and these were the Albanians who were extremely nationalistic and very fascistic before the formation of the SS Skanderberg. Before the formation of the SS Skanderberg. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, during the Second World War, there was an Albanian Bosnian SS unit called the SS Skanderberg. Now, the reason why I say it's Bosnian was because 60% of the Skanderberg division were Bosnian. The remaining 40% were Albanian. So that's why I say it was an Albanian Bosnian division. But before the formation of the SS Skanderberg, there was an Albanian nationalist paramilitary organization. It was called Bali Kombetar, which I think means National Front or something like that. Anyway, it was an ultra-nationalist paramilitary organization, and they would go around butchering and raping Serbs in Kosovo. That's what they did. And these were people who lived amongst the Serbs. They lived amongst the Serbs, and when the Italians invaded Albania in 1941, Bali Kombëtar and those like the members of Bali Kombëtar saw the Italian invasion of Albania as the opportunity to do massacres of Serbs. And they butchered thousands of Serbs in the year 1941 alone. And they continued to kill thousands of Serbs all throughout the rest of the Second World War. Bali Kombëtar was eventually just integrated into the SS Skanderberg. So that's the thing, is your neighbors are very friendly, everyone's very friendly, but when the zeal of politics kicks in and the zeal of tribalism kicks in, you really don't know exactly what can happen. That's the scary thing about it. Unless you really, really know your neighbors, right? And you know for certain that they're going to be cool with you, they're going to be on your side. It's sometimes hard to discern, especially when you're in an environment that is highly tense, that has a lot of political tension, and the political factions are living amongst each other. In that type of situation, I don't think it matters really how nice people are with each other. When party politics kicks in and a wave of zeal possesses the people, or possesses one of the two factions, the opposing faction, or people who are a part of that opposing faction by some sort of ethnic identity or religious identity or both, those people are in an extremely volatile situation, an extremely unstable situation, where they're not entirely sure if it's going to be their heads on the floor, if you know what I mean. So I love this quote from Nietzsche. I really do. I'm going to be using it forever. You know, in individuals, in individual people, insanity is very rare, but in party politics, it's the rule.